They're lazy. They don't want to work for anything. They're impatient. They expect to get money and promotions earlier in their careers rather than working and waiting like we had to do. These millennials question everything and struggle to just accept it. When asked or told to do something, they spend way too much time asking questions and needing to know why, rather than just do what they're told to do. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this format, I share thoughts, opinions, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I believe to be a unique life experience. And you can read more about that in the profile, bio, or notes. My intent is to share stories and experiences and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will help you on your journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5 and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some initial commentary or on current news or just thoughts. Then I'll have a deeper discussion on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Mine was great. Thank you. Because for the first time in 4 years, both of my sons came home for the holiday. You know, given that one is in New York and the other one's in California, we usually make Thanksgiving optional, in lieu of having everyone together for Christmas. But this was a nice surprise. And I'm not going to say anything about the Thanksgiving dinner menu. I've had enough feedback and grief on that over the past 2 episodes. And of course, following the wonderful Thanksgiving is Black Friday. Gotta tell you, America, you surprised me on Black Friday this year. Because despite consumer sentiment being at an all-time low for the year and shoppers feeling the weight of inflation, Black Friday sales reached new records this year. U.S. shoppers spent $11.8 billion on the year's biggest shopping day. And that's according to Adobe Analytics. That's an increase of over 9% versus last year. Hell, y'all even went to the malls. Mall of America reported the highest foot traffic ever for Black Friday weekend. So, are we really worried about the economy or not? I mean, is affordability really an issue? Well, let's take a closer look at the numbers and see if we can find some truths. First, part of the increase in the sales dollars was driven by inflation. So it's not that many more items were purchased than last year. They just cost more per item. Second, a lot of the spending was from high-income households, while lower to middle income households actually spent a little less than last year. And this is just another indication of our K-shaped economy. Now, you may or may not have heard this term, but believe me, you will hear more about it. Simply put, in this type of economy, there is a bifurcation, with some segments doing really well, which represents the upstroke of the K, while other households are worse off, the downstroke of the letter K. Specifically, people who own stocks and homes have seen their net worth rise significantly in 2025 as the stock market continues to do well. But for the 50% of households who don't own stocks, they're only feeling the pain of the economy, which is inflation, housing availability and prices, and job insecurity. So this dichotomy drives the disconnect between the White House and other national leaders that keep telling us the economy is great, while most Americans keep telling them, no, it is not. So we have to continue to speak up and not let them forget that they represent all Americans and not just the affluent. One other point I want to address. I fear we are becoming a nation that cares less. And there's data to support this fear. The U.S. has one of the highest news avoidance rates globally, with more than 42% of Americans saying they actively avoid the news. Reasons for this include feeling worn out by the amount of it, finding the news depressing or untrustworthy, and worries that it might just cause arguments. Amazingly, in 2025, for the first time ever, social media overtook TV as Americans' number one news source. People are getting their news from YouTube and TikTok and social media streams. So overall, we're less informed, but don't seem to be that concerned about it. This may help explain why we are also less charitable. Over the last couple of decades, individual charitable donations are down significantly, not only in actual dollars, but also in just the total number of people who are giving. Another factor may be tied to church going, as Americans are at another all-time low for regular church attendance, which is where historically many people gave money. And there's an interesting generational component to this. Millennials and Gen Z Americans are much greater and more generous givers than Gen X or baby boomers. And they're not just writing checks. Wealthy donors under the age of 43 are more likely to volunteer, fundraise, and act as mentors for charitable causes rather than just give money. And that's according to a new survey from Bank of America Private Bank. So for those of you who are pulling back from news and giving, I just ask you to find something to care about. I get it. It's so much easier to not care if you're unaffected. I mean, the housing crisis is only a crisis if you're looking to buy or sell a home. If not, it has nothing to do with you. And if you have no children in school, why would you worry about the state of education or the dismantling of the education department? But historically, that's not who we are as a nation. You know, if the U.S. didn't care about the world, they'd be speaking German in London right now. You know, in 1961, Joan Trumpower was a 19-year-old white Southerner who was active in the civil rights movement. She was arrested and incarcerated for 2 months under suspicion of mental illness because authorities couldn't believe that she really cared about civil rights. And for most of our history, until recently, the U.S. has provided asylum to many looking to escape turmoil and persecution. So a couple summary points. Find a news source you trust and stay informed. Now, I understand the need to occasionally take a break. I do it myself. But I do believe we have a responsibility to understand what's going on in our community. And second, find something to care about and then do something about it, whether it's donating time, money, or skill. You'll be a better person and the community will be a better place. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. I want to talk about millennials. You know, that generation that gets a bad rap. And I believe most of it is unjustified. You know, I don't know if there's been a generation that has suffered more criticism, accusations, and negative press than millennials. And why is that? Why is this generation everybody's favorite punching bag? Well, I'd like to examine this a little more closely and objectively, and perhaps together we can come to a reasonable and objective view of this maligned generation. Okay, so first, when we say millennials, who are we talking about? Well, there may be some slight variations, but most people agree that millennial refer to people born from 1981 to 1996. They're also called Generation Y. So in 2025, we're talking about adults aged 29 to 44, most of whom are the children of baby boomers. Now, before we get into the discussion, I need to make a personal disclosure and admission. I'm a bit favorably biased toward millennials, as two of my three favorite people in the world are in this generation. Both of my sons are in their early 30s. Okay, that out the way. So the way I'll frame this discussion is to first outline the more common criticism and shots taken at millennials. Then I'll provide some perspective and context that may help the rest of us see the world through their eyes. My hope and intent are that with improved mutual understanding, perhaps sentiment, communication, and even policy will improve the daily lives for all of us, and not just the Generation Y. All right, what are the most common shots? Well, here's what I hear from the workplace. And these sentiments are also often attributed to some older Gen Z employees. Okay, they're lazy. They don't want to work for anything. They're impatient. They expect to get money and promotions earlier in their careers rather than working and waiting like we had to do. These millennials question everything and struggle to just accept it. When asked or told to do something, they spend way too much time asking questions and needing to know why, rather than just do what they're told to do. You know, they want a trophy for everything. They want more schedule flexibility and accommodations than we would even dare to request. They feel entitled. They're disloyal, always seem to be job hopping. Okay, those are the top ones. Some of you may want to add to this list, but this is more than enough for us to get started. You know, these sentiments and stereotypes are pervasive. More importantly, it's a problem. Not only for the millennials themselves, but for the entire company or organization. You know, I mentioned in a previous podcast that we all bring biases to the workplace, and that the first step in effectively managing biases is admission. Also, every generation that has ever lived looks negatively upon the generations that come after them. They don't know how tough we had it. The biggest problem with these stereotypes and biases is that they can lead to self-fulfilling prophecies. Let's say a manager believes that certain employees are lazy, and they may treat them that way or indicate that they feel they lack initiative. So this could lead to less challenging assignments. And then the employee sees this and disengages, or worse, retaliates, confirming the manager's initial belief. This cycle actually has a name. It's called the incivility spiral, which damages morale and job retention. Millennials are seen as job hopping, and the data somewhat supports that belief. They're a little less engaged, more open to making a change, and the average job tenure is 2.7 years. So it's true. They are job hoppers. But have you ever stopped to consider why millennials change jobs so often? Because looking for a new job is work. I mean, they can't be job hopping and lazy at the same time. Maybe employers should devote more time to understanding why their employees are not engaged and see if it's something they can better address. Another reason for changing jobs is better opportunity and career development. And lastly, changing jobs often leads to a double-digit salary increase, where the average annual salary increase or merit increase at your current job is usually less than 4%. Now, up until this point, my tone has mostly been millennial sympathetic. But I do believe some of the shots at millennials are valid. I don't think they're lazy, but I do believe there is an element of impatience. Let me share one of my personal examples. I once had a PR manager who was very impressive. I mean, although she was relatively young, she was probably 28, 29, she displayed a confidence and maturity far beyond her age. And I wanted her to know she was doing a great job, and I wanted to back up my support monetarily. So I called her in to give her some good news, or so I thought. So the conversation starts. I'm like, "Hey, Kelly, just want you to know you have really been performing great. And while I know performance reviews and bonuses are a few months away, I wanted to show you some appreciation now. So I'm adjusting your salary via a 12% increase, and the board has approved a stock option grant for you in the amount of 5,000 shares. I was not prepared for her reaction. She says, I was expecting a larger salary increase. Really? Well, how much were you expecting? I don't know. I didn't really have a number in mind. And I'm like, well, you had to have some number in mind for you to be disappointed with this number. She says, well, I guess I was looking for something more in the range of a 20% increase. I'm like, really? How'd you come up with that number? Well, I did some research online and looked at what other people at my level were making, and it seems like I should be making more. Okay, Kelly, you don't have a college degree, and I'm currently paying for you to go to school. So your lack of degree does somewhat reduce your salary potential in the marketplace. Okay, well, why didn't I get more stock options? Okay, wow. Do you realize I had to go to the board to get an out-of-cycle approval for you? So, at this point, I was getting a little frustrated. So I didn't want it to get worse. So I just ended it with, I feel you're clearly disappointed, but I want you to know this is a nice package. You can take some time, think about it. Maybe we can have another discussion sometime soon. And then I basically dismissed her. Well, she must have spoken to her father or someone else she trusted, because the next day I was actually traveling on business, but she tracked me down and called me. And she just wanted to let me know how much she appreciated everything I had done for her, and that she was very happy with the new compensation and, really thrilled to continue to work and contribute to the team. Like I said, she was smart, but sometimes the younger generation needs a bit of context. But older managers need to realize the times have changed. Employees have access to far more information about potential job opportunities and compensation. If this had been the situation when we were coming up, wouldn't we have invested time to see if there was something better available? Also, I've always railed against employers demanding loyalty, because very few organizations show loyalty to their employee base. Believe me, whenever the organization has to make a choice between what's best for the company and what's best for the employees, they will choose the company every time. Every time. Okay, so that's the workplace. Now, there's another knock that millennials are selfish and immature because they aren't getting married, they're not buying homes, and they're not having children at the rate of previous generations. Okay, all that is true. Those are facts. But there are really good reasons for this that were beyond the control of Generation Y. Because of the 2008 housing crisis and the Great Recession, millennials have been hit hard financially, with more debt and a lower net worth than their parents had at the same age. And then growing that wealth has been made more difficult due to the drop in the housing supply over the last 15 years, which has pushed prices up and made it that much harder to get into the market. And the housing supply continues to remain low as many older Americans have decided to either to stay put in their mortgage-free homes or with their mortgages locked in at a lower interest rate. Also, younger millennials are more aware of the risk of a bad company, and so they're more practical when it comes to money, from saving for emergencies to contributing to a retirement account, which they do at a greater rate than any other generation at their age. The investment banking company UBS found that millennials were the most financially conservative generation since the Great Depression. And 93% of millennials are somewhat wary of investing, according to a Capital One study. One final thought about millennials, and unfortunately, a very cruel irony. This generation had the greatest childhood. I mean, most of them grew up in pre-internet, pre-social media, so they didn't have those external pressures. And they had the best kids shows and TV program ever, including Rugrats. They had Nickelodeon, Animaniacs, all that. Kenan and Kel, Johnny Quest, Arthur, so many others. And then the music of their time. Oh man, you had the girl groups like TLC and the Spice Girls, the boy bands like Backstreet and NSYNC. This was the time of New Jack City hip hop. And the rock bands were cool, like Nirvana and Green Day, the Chili Peppers and the Pumpkins. And then they got to experience the artists with MTV's TRL and MTV Live and 106 and Park on BET. So, my summary on the millennials: they are the most unique generation. They had great childhoods full of fun, wonder, and dreams, but then had the harshest young adulthoods with the housing crisis, the Great Recession, and COVID. Older generations love to rail and criticize them, but given all they've had to endure, without much help from the government or us, I think we should consider their situation, show some empathy, and maybe give them a bit of a break. Okay, let's get to today's American history fun fact. Today's American history fun fact. Today I want to talk about Thomas Edison, great American inventor. Well, today I want to spend a little time separating the man from the myth. Okay, let's do the quick bio. Thomas Alva Edison was born in 1847 in Milan, Ohio, but he grew up in Port Huron, Michigan. By age 12, he had developed hearing problems, generally attributed to a bout of scarlet fever. And the problems were reoccurring and worsening, and by adulthood, he was totally deaf in one ear and partially deaf in the other one. In 1869, at age 22, he moved to New York and opened a company with his partner, Franklin Pope. The company made money renting telegraph lines. He was one of the first inventors to apply the principles of organized science and teamwork to the process of invention, working with many researchers and employees. He established the first industrial research laboratory, and as a businessman, he became wealthy and continued to champion invention for the span of his life. Okay? So let me first give him his flowers. He did invent the phonograph, considered his most original discovery. He originated and drove many of the advancements in telegraphy, and he was legitimately the father of modern invention. Okay, now to the truth. And some of the myths about him, he perpetuated himself. He often claimed to be self-taught, having never attended school. Well, this is absolutely not true. He had at least 3 years of formal education, which was not abnormally short for the times for a Midwestern kid in the 1800s. He was a ruthless businessman. While he was working at Western Union, he sold his quadruplex telegraph invention to their rival, Atlantic and Pacific Telegraph Company, for $100,000 in 1874. This is the equivalent of $2.8 million in 2025 dollars. Well, of course, Western Union was angered, and it led to litigation. Because Western Union was his client for this project, but the financier, Jay Gould, enticed Edison with the higher offer. In the end, Western Union won the legal battle, and they gained control of the device, but Edison still got to keep his money. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. It was actually invented by Sir Joseph Swan, a British physicist and inventor. However, with the help of Francis Upton, a Princeton graduate with an MA in science, Edison did invent the filament that made commercial lighting feasible, scalable, and profitable. In 1876, Edison created the first industrial laboratory concerned with creating knowledge and then controlling the application. The lab was located in Menlo Park, New Jersey, and it grew in size to cover 2 full city blocks. His staff was generally told to carry out his directions in conducting research, and he drove them hard to produce results. So Edison's name is registered on 1,093 patents, okay? But as the leader of his laboratory, Edison was credited for many inventions made in large part by other people who were working for him. Beginning in the 1880s, Edison found himself in competition and a race for technological superiority in commercial lighting. And the race was between Edison's direct current, or DC, versus Westinghouse's alternate current, known as AC. Now, AC was better, and Edison knew it. But many believe he opposed AC because, he couldn't grasp the more abstract theories behind AC, and he was trying to avoid developing a system he just did not understand. Okay? So what did he do? He engaged in a negative propaganda campaign to portray AC as too dangerous. He hired Harold Brown, who was an engineer and an activist, and he had him to perpetuate the campaign. So Brown was out kidnapping dogs, all right, and using them for public demonstrations that showed while 1,000 votes of DC would not kill a dog, 300 votes of AC would kill. And so he was literally electrocuting dogs in public to make a provocative case about the danger of AC. Well, the campaign ultimately failed, and AC became the power of choice for commercial lighting. All right. So while there's no doubt that Thomas Edison was a great and innovative inventor, he was actually more of an entrepreneur and businessman who made himself wealthy, often, mostly, from the efforts of others. Okay. That's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you so very, very much for listening. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth, and also the Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. Thanks again, and I will talk to you soon.